Greetings, students. This is Kiala Jacques, your professor, and always endeavoring to bring you experiences from the folks who do the work that you're learning about, do the work that we've talked about, are applying the frames and the theories and the models that are showing up in your course content. So I'm really excited to introduce you to another amazing colleague of mine, Miss Candace Thompson. Miss Candace, will you introduce yourself, talk about your role and the organization that you work for, and then we'll get into a little discussion.
Okay. Good evening. As Professor Jacques has said, my name is Candace Thompson. I am Community Outreach Manager for Baylor Scott & White Health and Wellness Center at Juanita J. Craft in sunny South Dallas, here in Dallas, Texas. Yeah.
Brilliant. And will you tell us about some of the issues that you work on there at the Juanita Craft Center?
Well, at the center, we address all chronic health conditions. So think about asthma, think about high blood pressure, think about diabetes, think about situations with obesity. We address all chronic health conditions. Initially, our hyper focus was on diabetes because a number of our community members in our targeted zip code areas were 3 times as likely to die from complications of diabetes rather than to live in comparison to other parts of the Metroplex. And with that, there was a public-private partnership that was developed between the City of Dallas and Baylor Scott & White to be able to address the situation, because we wanted to look at what would it look like to be able to manage rather than to have people dying from a disease that is, 1, preventative, but 2, also it is manageable. And so what are the things that are keeping people from being able to properly manage their health conditions? And so yeah, I get the pleasure of working in community each and every day, and particularly working with people as they address their health conditions, or work with others who are living with people who may have those health conditions as well.
So I appreciate a few things that you said about your work. You mentioned that the folks that you work with who live in a particular zip code have a higher likelihood of living with some chronic diseases than
Yes.
others in Dallas. And you also talked about that they are taking steps to address some of the barriers to those lived realities. So will you talk a little bit about the role inequity plays? Why are there health differences in your zip code than in other codes? What historical or policy or access to resource realities have caused that to be a truth for the population you serve?
Well, I think there are a number of things that intersect, that create the disparities that have existed in the community where I work. Some of them are historical, some of them are present day decisions. But historically, it has been, I would say historically it was an African American Black neighborhood, and but over time you had, at one point in time it was thriving. You had several Black businesses. People were doing well, for themselves at that given point in time. You had your businesses, you had your schools, you had people who you had levels of income within the community, and those are the things that when you have those different levels, you have everybody co-creating, coexisting, and your dollars and everything are shared. And so a big part of this has to do with you had a concentration of people living in community. That means they worked in the community, they went to church in the community, they supported the businesses that were there. And so with time, with certain laws, a big part of that has to do with integration. And so people, you start wanting to explore, what would it look like if I lived somewhere else, because I have a choice now. And so, so a lot of the businesses in the area were closed because people were no longer patronizing them. They were going to other stores in which they had previously been discriminated against from, being able to participate in those stores. And so, so people started moving further and further away, because living in southern Dallas or East Dallas was not the it place any longer. It was, how do I get out to the suburbs? Or how do I expand out further north, or, go west? You had like, the pioneer syndrome, I guess, in some ways, because you want a taste of it, of what life is like outside of where you already are. And so I mean, a big part of that is the disinvestment, because you had other. I mean, so that means your grocery stores started to leave. And then, so your mom and pop, and then your mom and pop stores, that were there, they closed down because of this investment. Then you have the grocery stores, but then because you have more blight, more people leaving, then they can't thrive either. So those dollars are gone. And then a lot of times then you have people who would love to leave, and seek other opportunities, but they don't necessarily have the means. So then you're left working with what it is that you have left and making that work. So I mean, so you have that, but then, and if you don't have grocery stores that provide, enough nutritious produce for you to have access to them, or if you have, limited transportation options, because transportation is expensive, or you're dependent on somebody else for your transportation, and so you're sacrificing, certain sacrifices are being made for convenience, and and there's a cost for that convenience, and sometimes that cost oftentimes can take place within your household for your health. So it takes place in what it is that you're eating, what it is that you're able to provide, or if you no longer have those employment opportunities that are available, that had once been available right there in your neighborhood, but now you're having to get on the bus and travel an hour or so out the way, and then trying to catch a bus, trying to get back home and we can't even call it a decent time, but I mean, because you spend most of your time traveling to and from to work. But then, by the time you get home, and if you have kids, and they're hungry and they don't have patience, and so your life is just set up a little differently. And so I mean, but I would also say we have issues with public safety. That's an issue, or over policing. But then you also have the other issue of I mean, and we talked about a little bit of the lack of economic development opportunities that exist. Then you have your housing issues, because you can't afford to buy the housing that you want, but you can't afford to leave where you are, but nor can you afford to ask for your landlord to make repairs, because if they do that, then what is the, you always having to think about what are the unintended consequences of any of your actions, because then they may raise the rent and may not have the means for that. So there are a lot of things that interplay in that space for creating health disparities. But I would say, I look at it as like all is not lost, but I look at the fact that opportunities do exist, but they exist at both ends of the spectrum. It exists at the point of where we as community can say, what, we own our health and we're reclaiming it, and we're going to choose to manage it. And that's a hard battle, because then again, you're having to think about, like, okay, so how am I going to have this conversation with a community member, and how are they going to value, because their time is, your time is the coin of your life, so you got to be careful how you spend it. But but if you don't feel like you have much time, or or you may feel like you're making these extra sacrifices, you may not think about, oh, let me do meal prep. Sounds really good if you can do it, but if you don't have that kind of time, you just don't have that kind of time. But I do believe that there's an opportunity space that exists for, like our health systems, for our insurance companies. It's going to be a paradigm, and it's going to be a mind shift that people are going to have to, be willing to take. But that's to do the full investment in a community's health. Because oftentimes, we're operating, it's a business. And as a business, everybody wants to, everybody wants to come out in the black. Nobody wants to be in the red. But even in starting a business, people understand that, like your first, season or two or whatever, I don't know, like they say, like, maybe the first 3 years, you're not really going to come up. But like once you start, you get everything, you have the investment, you get everything in place, then everything is able to, readjust, and then you're able to come out in the black. But I think there's an opportunity that exists for our hospitals and our other organizations to say, you know what, we're gonna come in and collectively choose to really fully invest, but then also not only to, like with dollars, but also like with action, like with legislative action, with policy, to support it. Not just doing the charitable thing, but doing the holistic piece, the social justice piece that I feel that it gets missed oftentimes. So, yeah.
So I really appreciate that particular last point, because it's about controlling the narrative, right? And partnering to control the narrative, whether it be a policy narrative or an ideological narrative about what health looks like and what it really means for everybody. So I'm curious, how do you talk about these challenges when you're talking with community members, and then you're inside of a hospital system? So when you're talking to the folks that you work with inside of the hospital system, how do you frame those conversations?
Well, I think, like what you said, it's having to frame it and tailor it towards the different audiences. What is important to the community member? What is important to the hospital system? And but then also realizing that one thing that I've had to realize is that anytime you say something or do something, there's going to be a consequence. That could be a positive one, or that could be a negative one, or it could just be, But certain times, in life, things have to be said, things have to be done. So in community, thankfully, I would say I have trust, and I have love. I think the community knows, the community that I'm able to interact with most knows that I love them. And so, but also, I take great honor in that, I won't say protecting, but like guarding against anything that would be harmful in community. And so I think, there needs to be more of people who are dedicated in that regard. So for me, when I'm talking with community, I try to figure out, like, what is it that's important to them? But then also it's important to ask, what is it that they would like to see? Separate from coming in, making the false assumption that I would have the answers, or that any other institution would have the answers. For me, it's about listening. But letting the solutions come from the community. And thinking about different opportunities and presenting that back to our leadership. So, because I look at my role is to be a generous listener, and to, if at all possible, at all times, to remove judgment. But also, I think what matters is I live in community, so I'm proximate. I see it. I'm very well aware. I feel it. It is my experience as well, and I also recognize where I think, just having some awareness where I have some privileges that my community members do not. Because I have a car, I'm able to go to a grocery store of my choice, and get certain foods that would be beneficial to me. And I know that I have other community members who don't have that same opportunity. And so, but I have relationships, where they say, hey, Candace, can you run me up to the store? Or when you at the store, can you get me? I got you. But so I think that makes a big difference. And I think sometimes in my area of growth and development, let's put it that way, is in having that conversation, particularly at the level with our hospital institutions, or with leadership, I guess you could say, because sometimes people are not proximate to an issue, they don't understand it. And, but a lot of times, the thing about it is like haven't had that conversation, like what's important to a business, it's money. So how can, what it is that I'm proposing, how can it save the money? How can it make the money? How can it be an investment of money? I think that's a major driver. But it's like, how can you make, a dollar stretch as much as possible? And so again, I think it's about knowing what is it of interest to both of those audiences, and how to, potentially get those two to court. So, so in some ways, you play matchmaker too, and which is always fun, I guess. But but it's being willing to listen to what is important to each party, but like to sincerely listen and set aside any of my own judgments or my own issues and concerns, but to be present and to be able to hold two ideals, as equal, not not having a judgment for either, but being able to say both of these things exist, and and what can be done so that all can have some kind of benefit. So yeah.
So that's really valuable, and it involves a particular level of self-awareness, so you can decenter what you would prefer,
Oh yeah.
what you find important, what you believe should happen next, in order to center what the community values and finds important and is excited about, and then of course your employer, right?
Correct.
Yeah, but you're a whole person, so yeah. So I imagine that there are issues of inequity that you're working on that actually touch your life. How do you, what are they first? Let's start there. And then how do you, in your personal life, like take steps to really address them or be an advocate within your own reality?
Yeah. So a big part of my job is I get to hire community health workers. So which I take great joy in that. I take great joy because, so I mean, your community health workers is kind of like your promotoras, your health promoters. And, so those, so like when you think about your community, those are your aunties, we all have play cousins, play mamas, and everybody else in community. I know I'm not the only one out here, but I mean, but those are the people in our community who have great influence. And so it's connecting with our community influencers and saying, like, hey, I have this job opportunity. Where the goal is, for us to go be a part of community and provide, health education. And I mean, and we can co-create it. So, but I need, everybody is needed. Everybody has a voice. There's a table and it's big enough to seat everybody. And, there's enough sunshine out here for everybody to get a tan. And so, so like that's the, I guess the piece of the equity that I enjoy doing, because it provides some economic relief, potentially, but it also, you're able to invest in people that may have been disinvested. But also who, people who realize that they still have gifts that they want to give, or, a lot, because a lot of, some of the community health workers, there's some of my seniors who've retired, and so, but they, but they're awesome, they do an awesome work. Those, and a lot of them are retired school teachers, or, may have been, or teaching churches. So, so we look at different ways of doing our outreach. Traditional and non-traditional outreach. But at the same time, like sometimes the struggle comes in is where, like we can't hire people who have a record. And so I think about my brothers and sisters who may have made a mistake some years ago, but that's not who they are today. And, and so, but at the same time, like I'm a part of an organization, that because you have this record, then you can't be considered, for hire. but at the same time, you're the person I'm trying to reach. And you're also a member of the community, and you also have, but it's like you also have like this mad influence and this mad love for your community. And so, so for me, it's like, having to, like, how do I still engage this person, but then, because I still need them, and I love their message, and I love that they have the connectedness, but at the same time, having to realize that, okay, I can't make you a part of the team. I mean, you could be unofficial, but I can't get you paid. So like I would say, that's an issue. How do I deal with, some of the things? And because also, we have people who have different, learning styles and learning abilities are, and so that it makes it challenging sometimes. Because I think, I would love to have a place for everybody, but sometimes you need certain people with certain skill sets as well. But for myself, I mean, that means, sitting and being quiet, which sometimes is really hard, because I'm an extrovert and I get energy by being around other people, but I also realize that I need to just sit with myself, and decompress and reflect and find ways that bring healing to me, and help push me further along. So I do that. I journal. I write a poem or two. I go I go hiking. And I do try to hang out with family and friends, and just try to keep, positive energy and light around me. So then I'm not, because I think sometimes, if you allow yourself to think too much about it, it would weigh you down and it start depressing you. And so it's like, okay, you got to climb your way up out of that, because then, if you get to that point, you're not going to be any good. And how are you going to actually be of some great service, in any other way? But also, being okay with the fact that, it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay not to have the answers to everything, but at the same time, it's like, it's my self-talk of, of not giving up, and still seeking, out other opportunities. Because I don't believe in throwing people away. I don't throw situations away. And so it's like, okay, so what from this can be, redeemed or reclaimed or reused, or like how can this situation be, reframed? So then because giving up is not an option. So yeah, those are just some of the things that I do to try to keep my brain sane.
Yeah. We have spent in this class a considerable amount of time during the first week learning about the way that we are socialized to both participate and perpetuate systems of inequality and oppression. And so I'm just curious, what are the ways, because I know you personally as well as professionally, and I know that you are very invested in recreating narratives that you've been given and taught. So what are the steps that you take to re-socialize yourself, to address the narratives of oppression that you've been socialized into?
I would say one of the things I try to challenge myself, and going into spaces, listening to different people, and their perspectives and their understandings, and understanding that I don't have all of the answers, and I am not always right, and being okay with that. Like, it's perfectly fine. Like, being open to learning, I think, has been my biggest thing. But also, I think about the fact that I grew up in a religious Christian household, and what that meant for me and to me. But then also the fact that I'm drawn to, like, Eastern philosophy, or even Sufi poets, and and being so cool with it, because that resonates with me. and not fighting it. But I think it is a lot of having to be willing to confront your own thinking on a consistent basis. Because I think about even where I work, there is a sometimes there is a, I guess, the challenge of when you think about like systems. And so, and if you're going to be an advocate for change or a catalyst for change, whatever word that they come up with, but if you're going to be in community and you seek to make positive changes, you have, you have to choose from which front you want to do that work. And so there's you can be on the outside agitator, and doing the protests and everything else. Or you can say, you know what, forget it. It's not worth it. I'm just going to join the system. But or you could choose to be, say I'm going to be in the system, but I'm going to be in the system working for the good of the people. And for me, that's what I choose to do. And and how I try to do that in my everyday work. And be willing for people to correct me when I, if because your elders will snatch you, and in a very positive, loving way for the most part. But sometimes, they just get with you and say, baby, you going the wrong way, and I need you to come back. I need you to sit. But being willing to listen to wisdom of others. So I spend a lot of time with my elders, which I love it. I grew up spending a lot of time with my grandparents, so sitting around and gleaning wisdom, because I want to be wise, and I also want to be able to share something with others who, whatever it is that they choose to do with their lives. But I want to be I want to be able to give that. So,
Yeah, thank you for that. So that is the last of the formal questions that I have. Any closing thoughts, any aha moments, or any things that students should perhaps pick up and read as they continue in their journey developing their own liberatory consciousness and understanding issues of diversity and justice?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm a nerd, so I read some of everything. Let me see, what books do I have? Oh, there's this book called Trauma Stewardship, which may be good. I read Octavia Butler. That's my fiction fix. But then also, I read a lot of nonfiction. I don't want to shape anybody's understanding or their own leanings, but I would just say take some time. What'd you say?
I said they're in a class. This is exactly where we're supposed to be, shaping their understanding and giving them opportunities for critical analysis.
Gotcha. I would say think about the things that you feel strong about. Kind of like a debate class. You want to learn both sides of the argument, and be open to that. Not allowing yourself just to have just one way of looking at something. Look at something and what is it that would challenge that, and read the opposite of whatever you are so comfortable with. But then also look for ways to step out of your own comfort zone, and be willing, and if you don't already, be willing to listen, much more than you speak, because I think there's a and just, but also trust yourself in the process, because I don't think anybody arrives all at a stated time. Like, we don't have a time that we're supposed to get there. We get there when we get there, and so careful not to compare yourself to anyone else. Just know who you are, where you are is right where you're supposed to be. That's what I would say.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and sharing with us from your lived experience in the field. We appreciate it.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for the consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, students, on to the next interview. Thank you for joining us tonight.